Hi, and welcome back to Resilience Unravelled. On a sort of very strange summer's day outside my window, there's rain is lashing down, but in front of me is the smiley, cheery face, basically lighting up the day with Tim Lupinacci. A fantastic name there, and I'm expecting to hear the full Italian accent. I'm expecting to hear tales of pizza and pasta. So, first of all, Tim, good afternoon. How are you?
Russell, it's great to be here. I'm probably going to disappoint you on the accent, but I do love pasta and pizza. I'm honored to be here and talking about leadership and resilience.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it as well. Two of my favorite subjects. Why don't you just start the ball rolling by telling us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah, I'm in Birmingham, Alabama, originally from Philadelphia, up
Oh,
in North America, north of the United States. But I am currently the CEO and chair of Baker Donaldson, which is one of the 100 largest law firms in the U.S. I've been practicing law for almost 35 years. In the last 20 years here at Baker Donaldson, and the last six as CEO. And it's a full-time job, so I don't practice law anymore. And I've really enjoyed doing that. I've been married to my wife for 35 years and have a 28-year-old daughter who got married last year, and just enjoying watching them thrive together and leading my company. So.
interesting. Now, I also was an ex-CEO of a law firm, so that's quite interesting. What branches of law are you in?
Yeah, I personally did corporate restructuring and solvency work, mostly
Yeah.
representing banks, financing sources. But our firm is a full service firm for the most part. Some of our practices that are most recognized by the marketplace are healthcare transactions, regulatory litigation. Our financial services industry team is really well known, and then we do litigation, corporate transaction, M&A work, privacy, data security across a broad gamut of different industries. So really full service government enforcement type work as well, white collar crime
Yeah.
across the mostly the southeast and then now up into the northeast out of the United States.
Yeah. We did a sudden road trip a couple of years ago and went to Birmingham. It's quite an interesting
Yeah,
place. Yeah, quite
yeah,
fascinating. Very different to
yeah.
Philly. Wow.
It is, and we moved
Yeah.
around a lot growing up. But I've been in Birmingham now for 35 years and really enjoy it. And it is home, and but I also traveling and as well.
Very good. It is interesting, the legal world at the moment, because law traditionally has been seen as something quite static, something quite fixed. Now suddenly you're having to pivot. I guess that must be a challenge for organizations like yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting because part of our job is from having served as a CEO is we're helping our clients navigate regulatory environment, new laws, new statutes that get put into place, varying statutes, executive orders. And so now I think with some of the laws and changes in the law this year, we certainly as a law firm organizationally have to make sure that we're complying with all the new executive orders and the law. And so that has included us having to get our own in-house counsel, really working through some of that. And our position has been about all this. We're gonna comply with the law, and then we're gonna take care of our people and really help ensure that all of our colleagues have ability to thrive and succeed and to have a pathway to success. And so we've really tried to balance it that way. It's no different than how we help counsel our clients. And so it is
Mm.
interesting to now be the client a little bit and having to do that a little bit more than you typically see. Yeah.
But it is interesting because you've had that part of legal practice is longevity.
Yeah.
It's about unbendingness. It's about certainty. And now you're doing what all the rest of us are doing, which is there's a very fast evolving external climate. There's a need to remessage, to rethink about things. So how is
Yeah.
what is known as quite a conservative, unchanging profession dealing with this sort of this external change thing? Because resilience is part of change management, isn't it? It is a little bit about innovation and learning and taking
Yeah.
risks and being daring,
That's
and
right.
again, that's the sector's not renowned for that. Do you find there's a resistance there, or is that coming along quite well?
No, there's certainly resistance. I even would go back before 2025. If you go back, I don't know, 5, 10 years, thinking of the law as a profession, an honorable profession, a noble profession, but it really is a business. And
Yeah.
over time, you evolve from these partnership kind of mentality to being run like I talk about. We need to be a best run business like our clients. We're a $500 million enterprise last year. 57 of the largest firms in the US, over $1 billion of revenue last year. So that's business. You have to
Yeah.
have ideas like accountability and expectations of each other and looking at ROI and return on energy and what you're doing and accountability and expectations. And so that has been the biggest part of the change management I've had to lead the last 6 years is because we had pretty much plateaued on a lot of metrics, not just financial engagement of our colleagues and marketplace perception. And so we really had to get into a growth mindset and to be thinking like a best run business, which a lot of people, that was a big change for folks. And it has had to be one of the, there's all the data, all the research on how you can transform and have change management while preserving the core of who you are. And we've really had to work through that. And it has been a lot of resistance, but then building authenticity about what we're doing, being transparent about what we're doing, with the why behind why we're doing some of the change. And certainly it's carried into even the external things that go on around us every day. The economy can go up or down, and that's going to impact our clients' ability to pay. So we've had to be pretty nimble through a lot of things, not just in the last several months. And you're right, resilience is at the core of all of that.
And it's a challenge because I don't think a lot of people understand in legal businesses or service businesses.
Yeah.
It's not like you build a product and then you sweat that product for 20 years, creating billable hours. You're selling the time that the business on the whole.
Yeah.
And when the project finishes, it finishes, and you've got to find another one. And if you're going to grow, you've got to find one, you've got to find two. And so there's this constant churn. We used to call it finding and minding and grinding many years ago, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah.
But it's really it's a very difficult practice. It's a very difficult business to grow value in, to be able to hand over, which is I think why thinking about it as a business is very challenging, because building innate value in it in order to be able to sell it is pretty tricky. Normally it's just the in here over the UK, it's just what's the value of the balance sheet, and that's pretty well it, because nearly everything else is goodwill. And if you lose your top team of lawyers, you've almost lost your business, haven't you? So it's a very flexible, dynamic structure with lots of different intricacies that you wouldn't find in a manufacturing company, for example.
No, I totally agree, Russell. And that's one of the, you hit the nail on the head that we have whatever 300 equity partners who are bringing in the primary bulk of our business. And any one of them can walk across the street any given day to another firm and probably get more money in the short term. And then you're right. And then if it's a group of folks, then that's going to have impact on the bottom line. And it's certainly nothing like a top down authoritarian kind of do this because we said we have to do it. It is really building that trust, that authenticity to understand what we're trying to do, building a culture where we do care about the whole person, the thinking about mental health and wellness and resilience
Mm.
and how we're working hard. It's a very stressful profession, but how can we help you take care of yourself? And it is a unique, I think as professional services firms are unique that the top talent can just walk across the street and you can
Yeah.
lose a lot of business. And so certainly there's things you can do, like we really work hard to collaborate. We're encouraging collaboration. There's all the data and science out there about that if you're working with a particular client in more than one line of business, they're a stickier client. They're more likely to stay with you long term. You do more sophisticated work, more purposeful work, and that makes it a little less likely that one individual can walk out and take the whole
Yeah.
client. So there's ways to deal with it, but at the core of it, I've got to build authentic relationships with these owners that they trust where we're heading and they like our culture and our platform is giving them the opportunity to thrive because as you said, it's not just making a widget that, that then you can just sell and commoditize and maximize your profit.
It's interesting. There's so many dynamics about why people work in places, but often it's money, intellectual challenge, which you find particularly in law firms. The job that you're doing is stimulating, challenging, fun, and often it gets you where you're going. And the challenge with lawyers is that all lawyers are always right, irrespective of whether we're wrong or not. So actually,
Right.
you often find that the level of disputation, the level of, I was going to say conflict, but I mean that in the sense that for me, conflict's inevitable, fighting is optional, that old phrase.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you have this sort of healthy conflict, don't you? You have those rules, professional disagreements, which I think people don't understand are part of a workplace where you have expertise, not just opinions. And what you're doing is often you're trading different levels of expertise. And that conflict, that sort of creative disagreement is a vital part of culture, isn't it? It's part of the fabric of interests when you have people with high levels of expertise. And it's very often a job of a leader. It's quite difficult, isn't it, to stimulate that creative discontent, which is managed, but
Right.
also to create it in such a way that the newest generation are all aren't totally bent out of shape by someone saying
Right.
something odd and they take
Right.
exception to it. So how do you manage the disparities between those sort of generational trends? So you've got probably older people who want this massive fighty sort of culture because they find it quite stimulating, and the newer people who are coming in possibly a bit more vulnerable. Well, how do you deal with that as a leader?
Yeah, it's a great question, Russell. And so one thing I would say when you were first talking about the feisty, the argumentative, the lawyers are paid to win their argument,
Yeah,
right? So they're going to make the argument whether they're right or wrong. They're going to keep doing that. And so that is a challenge when you're making decisions. One thing that I found that helped, that read and studied, Winston Churchill was great about what he used to call dinner table diplomacy, getting
mm,
people around the table, in his instance, drinking brandy and smoking cigars, which I don't necessarily my thing. But as to the older folks, the equity shareholders, some of them are young too. We have some up and comers
yeah,
really. I really like that idea of getting around the table and breaking bread and sharing things and getting to understand each other a little
yeah,
bit more so that when you do make a decision, they understand maybe a little bit more about who you are. And I understand why something may have triggered them a different way and why they have different opinions. And I want to hear their opinions. I want to get better. I don't know it all. And so I really try to have that kind of attitude. Now, as between generations, it's the same thing. I try to be authentic and listen and try to learn. And we've tried as an organization. We've built in some flexibility into there's not just this traditional pathway of you bill X number of hours and 7 or 8 years from now you're going to be a partner and then there's this we've built alternate pathways. Some people may say I
oh,
don't want that type of stress
yeah,
and pressure. I want particularly a younger generation wants some more flexibility so they
mm,
can work less hours on an agreed agreement, make less pay, and they can still ultimately get to become a partner, but it may take a few more years. So
yeah,
that's how we've tried to listen, and we have empowered teams of what we call them associates, the younger lawyers, to associate advisory board to give us advice, to give us insights. And again, it's not one that we can do everything they want us to do, but we get good ideas and good flow of dialogue to help meet them where they are. Because it's several, I think, what do we have, 5 generations in the workforce now?
yeah. And I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because in the old days, it was the old up and out. You had two
Right.
years to make a certain grade, and if you didn't, you were gone. And of
Yep.
course, now you have new laws. You have AI law, you have internet,
Yep.
digital law, you've got environmental law, which is, I don't know
Yep.
where it sits in the US, whether you believe in the environment anymore. Who knows this week? But but law by its very nature is a constantly evolving thing,
Exactly.
isn't it? And it's
It
that,
is.
and it is, you almost be big enough to create these very interesting things. And also you have, I guess, this sort of challenge, don't you? Because you're technocrats. And
Right.
sometimes you don't want technocrats managing other groups of technocrats because you end up losing your best technocrat and ending up with the worst manager. And so this idea of what creates a manager and
Yeah.
leader sometimes sits outside of that technical line. And sometimes the most effective leaders are the ones that have not been a practicing
Yeah.
solicitor or a lawyer for a while because they just learn these new skills. And that's a challenge, isn't it?
It is. It certainly is, and a lot of times I think historically in law firms, the person who had the biggest book of business would then
Yeah.
get tapped to be the leader of either the firm or the biggest group in the firm, things like that. And I think as it's become more thoughtful as a business, and we have more expectation of what that means to be in that role of leadership, I think there's some people that are big rainmakers, able to go out and develop business. They don't want that extra administrative nightmare or hassle of dealing with things, and they want to go do what they thrive at. And we've really tried to help place people that way and do some training for some of the next generation leadership training to try to think about who are some of those maybe outside the box potential successor leaders. You're right. There's got to be an intentionality about it, or else the loudest voice or the biggest book of business will get the title and then they won't do anything. And then that
Yeah.
group will really wither at times.
Yeah. That's interesting. So as we
Yeah.
start to venture into maybe unpacking leadership a bit more. Before we do, though, I was very intrigued to see that you're both chairman and CEO. And in the UK, we've separated legally those two roles. And so you can't have a
Yeah.
chairman and CEO. So I'm just, well, what's the thinking? I understand the thinking behind the separation. What's the thinking behind the non-separation of those two roles?
Yeah, it is interesting because I think I don't know the percentage. It's probably 50-50 here in the US of firms that have it, whether you have it the same person or you have separate individuals. It's been historically part of our firm. That's just been what it has been, the same person as the chair and the CEO. And I'll have to be honest, that was a little bit of a challenge when I stepped into the role because I'd led a department, a business unit, I'd led an office, I'd led teams, certainly, but I'd not really served. I've served on boards, more nonprofit boards, but really stepping in as that role of the chair and what does that mean and how does that work? So it has been a little bit of a challenge. I've really studied a lot and worked hard to become a better board chair. And I guess some of the thought process at Baker Donaldson has been that we really try to work collaboratively together. We're going to have disagreements, but at the end of the day, we want to stack hands. And I guess there's a thought that the chair of the board can then help continue the thought of let's move together unified with the board and then from the executive side, the
Yeah.
management side. But it's been challenging and it's an interesting dynamic. I've thought about whether that's something that you should separate them, but in the U.S. we can do it, and I happen to be both roles right now, and
Oh,
we have been
congrats.
for the history of our firm. So
Double money.
Although that I don't think that's part of what I see in our bylaws. So
Shame you changed the bylaws. So, just for those who don't know, and it's interesting in the States, I'm not as familiar. How is the chair role and the CEO role different, given that you do both? How do you? So, is that a case of wearing two hats, or is it a case of wearing two hats or something else?
it's interesting, and some of it I think is the nuance of it being a law firm because we have our board is structured where it's all you have to be a shareholder at our firm, so it's all
Yeah,
internal, usually equity
equity.
shareholders,
Yeah,
and so there is the fiduciary obligation as the board chair is to make sure that we're doing things in the best interest of the organization, and we have the board members have that same fiduciary obligation. Now it's interesting because as the CEO, it's the same thing. I'm trying to do the best interest of all 1,300 people. I'm trying to make decisions that will help us thrive into the future. Not that every individual is happy, but that we're, as an organization, while it's a little bit different, I'm trying to, there is some overlap just because of the nature of at least in the way our law firm is structured. And I think a lot of law firms are structured because they're equity shareholders. So even our board members have at a necessity a self-interest, right, in their
yeah.
own practice. Some of them are leaders of groups. So we talk a lot about that and that we're really there for the hat of doing what's in the best interest of the firm, of our shareholders, and driving forward. But I haven't found a lot of conflict between the two. And I think it's some of the uniqueness of how our firm and really maybe the legal industry is structured. So here
Yeah,
in the
that's
U.S.
interesting. So
Yeah.
talk to me about, let's unpack this leadership thing, because I know it's something you want to talk a bit more about. So I suppose we should start by understanding your definition of not what a leader is, but what a leader's for.
Yeah, that's a great question. I view leadership, I define leadership as influence and impact. I think we all have that influence on others. And I think I've talked sometimes about the best leader in our law firm. One of the best leaders in our law firm is someone who's a receptionist and she owns her desk. She owns that open space when clients may come in and have a need or they need a conference room or something's amiss and she can solve it. That's not necessarily in her job description of answering the phone and directing it to somewhere else, right? It's having that influence to make things better. You were joking about Italian. I do know there's this old Italian phrase called anteambulo, which is the idea of clearing the path. It's one who clears the path for someone else. And I think it goes back to ancient Rome. And I think of leadership a lot like that. How can I help or how can anyone help someone else's pathway, their journey to trying to achieve their ambitions and to get them unified to come together and then help them get there and help them succeed. So I think that's a lot of when I think about leadership, it's about that impact and influence on others, helping others to thrive and succeed, and then trying to do that collaboratively so that we have a shared culture. We have a purpose in what we're trying to connect the dots on purpose on what we're doing to the greater good.
So that's good. That makes sense to me, but that tells me what how you do leadership, but it's not telling me what leadership's for. And
Yeah,
ultimately, leadership's actually for performance, isn't it? It's about sweating the
sure.
assets so you get more than the value you're paying for. Or is that too cynical?
Absolutely.
Oh, it's
No,
okay,
no,
you agree.
I think that ultimately we're here to, I
I
mean,
don't
we're
think we're
here,
honest about leadership, do we? We don't talk about
yeah,
this bit of it. We don't say,
yeah.
hey, look at Gallup and have all these levels of engagement. Engagement is how much extra effort do you put in without being paid for. And it's the sort of guilty secret of leadership I often think we don't talk about. I just,
Yeah, certainly that's the thing. This organization, Baker Donaldson, only succeeds and thrives if we're profitable. We got to
mm,
provide excellent legal services. We got to get paid fair value for what we're providing to our clients, and we do. We need to make profit. We need to pay our top rainmakers compared to what they can go get across the street. We have to be competitive to attract the best business services and staff members and keep them. But ultimately, I think that's clear. Maybe it's a hidden secret, but that's what we're for profit organization. But I think the ways to maximize that profit then get into these ideas of I do think engagement, how people feel connected to the purpose of what we're doing, to our strategy, that they feel that they can better themselves through talent development, skill building, through providing mental health wellness
mm,
training and resources. Those may be considered soft skills and it doesn't necessarily tie directly to profits, but if we're taking care of our people and we're serving our clients, then I think the profit that you have to succeed as an organization will happen. It's a better chance that you're going to have drive more of it. So that's how I think about it. But I agree with you. I got to make money. I got to make money from my shareholders or they're going to go somewhere else. And then we're going to
yeah.
really struggle as an organization.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you have leadership with your internal teams, which is about how do you get more than you're paying for.
Right.
And then with clients, you're also doing leadership the other way around, which is how do you deliver less than you're being paid. because that's
Right.
how you generate margin, isn't it? So it's,
That's right.
and I always worry about authenticity because I'm not a great believer in it. So you mentioned it
Yeah.
earlier, so I just wondered what you
Yeah.
meant by it.
And I agree. It's an interesting concept, but I'm going to show up as Tim, and I've got some like I love Disney World, so I may bring some Disney references into some of my messaging. I like to run, so I may talk about that. It's talking about I can feel like I can be Tim. I can show up who I am. Now, yeah, I've got to make hard decisions. And
Mm.
I've got to have hard discussions with people. And I'm not going to use a reference to Churchill or Disney or whatever in one of those type things. But I want to be transparent. I think, again, I'm a big fan of Churchill and a lot of how he led. He was very open about the challenges that were facing the country back in World War II, and it was going to be a hard slog. But he had the belief and the confidence that they could go forward. I thought he was pretty authentic about that. Now, I'm not going to air any dirty laundry and stuff, or I'm not going to get in all my personal stuff, although there's not dirty laundry there. But I think it's that balance of just feeling like I'm being honest and truthful. So that's what I think about as authenticity of just, and not trying to hide the ball, not trying to, we're a very transparent organization, so everyone can see everyone else's numbers and things. And I think that's all part of this openness kind of culture. But
Does
so,
everyone
but
see
you
each
think
other's? No, I was just
authenticity
interested.
could.
Do you show each other's salaries? Does everyone know what
Well,
they?
all the shareholders see everyone's salaries, and then the associates and staff and business services only would see their own. But they see all the numbers of the firm, how we're doing financially,
Yeah.
and we report
Yeah.
about that. But yeah,
There's
but
a
the shareholders
very
see each other.
Yeah, there's a very big, I forget which organization it was that did that, didn't it? Just everybody knew everybody else's salary and they talked about transparency
Yeah,
and they did that. It was quite a courageous thing to do, as I remember at the time. It was, I think
yeah.
initially it started off being quite contentious, but after a while it just, like everything, it just settled down. Everyone got used to it and nobody cared anymore.
It becomes part of the culture. And now, look, there's a lot of law firms in the U.S. and maybe in the U.K. too, where it's like that old black box idea.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's some challenges when everything's open. And you have to really work hard, and we do, to make sure that people are with comparable books of business and economic performance are getting paid the same. And it keeps all that honest because it's all right out there. Or have an explanation for why somebody may be a little anomaly up or down. But yeah, that's how we've done it, and it's worked for us. But again, I know there's contrary views about being that open or authentic.
Yeah, and that's what makes it life interesting, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
actually, it's that classic thing, isn't it? Whichever leader follows you, often what they do is they wipe out everything you did and said, let's, in other words, to get superior. When I took over as CEO quite recently, it's the first thing you do is you look at what everybody else did before you, and you, not for the point of being just churlish for the sake of it, but actually the reasons that things aren't working is because of the way they were doing it beforehand. And you can
yeah,
often find yourself in the same problems years down the track. And often I wonder, because a lot of, it's interesting talking about the nature of change, depending on the type of organization one is in, and I guess you're less of an issue with you, but some organizations change. There was a very famous organization in the UK that in 11 years made profit once in 11
mm,
years. Yeah, I know.
wow,
And it's a very famous company. And the only reason it didn't make any profit that year is it didn't do any organizational change. And
uh,
because every year it was, we're now regional, now we'll be global. We've got these markets, now this time we'll be horizontally integrated. No, next time we're going to be a matrix. Now we're not going to be a matrix. And then one year we forget we made loads of money. The next year we need to. And I think
right,
sometimes we get into that. We build resilience because we're needing change. And then in order to keep the resilience, we keep changing. So we get the wrong idea about what resilience is for. So we think that we have to maintain resilience by having irrelevant change. Now that sounds,
yeah.
maybe that's just an academic argument that I'm just working through in my own mind, but I just wondered your views on that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I've seen companies that do that too. Like it's the latest, greatest, like big press release to then try to build a big boom to then help drive profit or revenue.
Mm,
I think another side of that, which we've really worked hard to try to do, is we launched a 5-year strategic vision. And you can argue whether 5 years is too long and things change so quickly or whatever. But that was our vision. But then in the middle of that, you have excitement at the launch. We had a big retreat and everyone's excited about Baker Vision 2028. When we get close to the end in 2028, everyone's going to be excited to get across the finish line. But then you get in the middle, and how do you keep that momentum and the
yeah.
resilience? Because people get tired, and yeah, we elevated our efforts last year. We can't do it again. And so what we've tried to do is then take it down and say, okay, these are some things we learned last year within that umbrella of the mission, and some of the things that were really working. So last year we talked about let's really double down on these few things that are
Mm,
working well to have a greater impact. And then as we got into the later part of last year, we realized that, yeah, there were about, let's say, 40% of the organization were really embracing this. And it was all a vision built on what clients want. This isn't Tim's vision, it's what clients want. And we had about 40 or 50% really buying into it and others who really weren't owning it. So this year, we really built a theme of within Baker Vision, everybody's got to own their impact. We can only drive momentum. We can only drive accountability. We can only drive purpose in what we're doing by each individual stepping up and owning what they can own, controlling their controllables. So it's trying to build resilience in a certain focused area that to help people do that while we're trying to achieve the organizational overlay of of Baker Vision. I agree with you. I would not be a fan of the yo-yo of just doing something new every day or every quarter to try to juice profits, although I guess you could try to do that. I've been more focused on if we do a strategy, let's not just let it sit on the shelf and gather dust. Let's do an actionable plan, and then we need to pivot within that during different years. Let's do that to keep the momentum going.
Yeah. I find this issue quite interesting. So, in a particular way, and let me see if I can articulate this. But first, that gives me thinking time. In a smaller company, one of the jobs of the leader, and the different views of leadership styles and blah, forget all that for a minute. But one of the views about a good leader is that they're out of the front of the organization, pushing ahead of the organization. And maybe this is the wrong analogy, but dragging it along behind it, or being a catalyst, or coming back in and firing up and lighting fuses and all that sort of stuff. You can see by my very imaginative language that I really believe in this. But if that's a good model of leadership, which is good for small organizations, does that still hold true in larger organizations? Or do you think the leader has to mature and find a different way of doing something?
Yeah, it's a great question, Russell. I think even in small organizations, I would say that you may have a little bit more power, authority to just say, be out front and say, come follow me, we're doing this, and just get it done. I think as we've scaled, what's so important to me is I want our colleagues to understand the why of what we're doing. The why behind why these decisions, why we're
Yeah,
driving this strategy. And I think that probably is true for smaller organizations, but that's the only way. And again, I have to add that overlay of the legal industry, which is a very flat. I've got to
yeah,
bring the feet. I'm not going to drag equity partners along with me if they don't believe in what we're trying to accomplish, because they'll just opt out and take their clients and go elsewhere. So it is a really important, and certainly in our organization, the size of we're is I've got to have the why behind what we're doing,
yeah,
and the vision is built exactly on what our clients tell us they want. And so if the clients are saying, I want somebody who knows my business and knows my industry and gives me proactive advice, not just waits for me to call, they tell me things I should be worried about before I'm even thinking about it.
yeah,
That's a true trusted advisor, and that's what the
yeah.
clients want. Then we've got to get better doing that. And then here's how I think we can get there, and here's some ways that we can get there. And you talk about the why behind it, but it
You're a
certainly
big, you're a
as you
big
get
Simon Sinek fan, aren't you? I can tell.
I do Simon Sinek, but I like that concept. I think is a
Yeah,
base concept of how I think, certainly in leading our organization, because again, and maybe it's unique to the legal industry or professional services, but it's something that I think it's really important for us to do. But I think it's important for smaller organizations too, I would think.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting because I remember a PE person telling me that leadership in small organizations was different from middle organizations to large organizations. And what he talked about was more of the sort of diplomacy and political acumen you need in a large organization, because it is more like, and especially in legal firms, because it's, the old phrase is herding cats, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
you have this, and I know there's a phrase that you've mentioned somewhere, something called dinner table diplomacy, which I thought was
right, right.
interesting, because I know you've written a book about some of these issues now.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about dinner diplomacy, and because it's mentioning two things that I really enjoy. And clearly dinner most of all. So how does that work? What's that all about, and how can I
Yeah, and
use that?
that's that idea that I learned from some what Churchill did about getting all these
Ah,
leaders around the table
yes,
and breaking bread and then sharing things. But then and we use those meetings, as I've read, to then try to get to an ultimate result, right?
yeah,
And so how I've implemented that, and part of it, this is true for a larger organization as compared to a smaller one. We're in 24 offices spread over like 13 or 14 states. So I can't be everywhere all at once. And I can generally get to every office once or twice a year. But when I'm there, I walk the halls, I can sit in people's office. But really gets me really fired up is just to go to breakfast, lunch, or dinner with colleagues. And like I said, just break bread, share a glass of wine, find out about their lives, find out out about their kid who's going off to college or the new baby that they've got. And that really, you're building those relationships to then ultimately you're helping to build belief in you and understanding where I'm coming from. And it also opens up opportunities that when they have disagreements, that we now have a place where we've shared things together and it's a little easier to have that discussion. And we can disagree, but we also know that we really enjoyed each other's company. So I try to do that whenever I get to a different office, is to really spend time not only walking the halls, but also over dinner or over lunch, just really sharing things and talking about things I'm struggling with, things they're struggling with, ways I can help them. Listening, for me, a lot of it is about listening. How can I help them? They're in the trenches and I'm not anymore working. What are some obstacles they're having in serving their clients that I can help fix? So
And
that's
that's
what I
back to
mean
your
by that.
philosophy of clearing the way, isn't it? Because actually,
That's
that's
right.
a really
Yeah,
vital part of it, isn't it? It's
it
the
is.
corporate
Yeah.
detritus that we have that are being created, the sort of fallout from previous changes is really important to get rid of.
And you never, and as you scale, and then nobody ever talks about it because I don't know, and it's some, but that, I mean that I think I can't remember if I've mentioned, but our COO and I are now in the middle of a summer, quote unquote, summer road trip where we're going to all 24 offices in a
Mm.
7 week period, and there's been a couple instances where people said, "This is something I have to do. I don't really think it." I know we've done it for 20 years. I don't think it adds any value anymore. And when we look at it, I go, no, wow, why are we doing that? And
Mm.
it's not part of my day to day or our CO's day to day. We just didn't know about it. That is a big part of it, clearing that stuff away.
Yes, this was moments of reality, shocking reality,
Yeah.
as someone once said. So you've
Yes.
written a book
Yeah.
called Everybody Leads. And
Yeah.
so two questions, I suppose, which is a terrible interviewing technique to ask two at a time, but why did you write it and who did you write it for?
Yeah, I guess I should do like a lawyer. I object, Your Honor. That's a compound question, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Why did I write the book? They really grew out of this idea. When I was a young lawyer and I didn't have any lawyers in my family, I was working and I viewed law as a very transactional practice. I would get a project, I would do it, I would turn it in and go on to the next practice and
Mm.
next project. And I did one, I did a project, a lot of financial information, data and analyzing. I turned it into another lawyer who then gave it to our boss and we had totally messed up the project. I had miscounted stuff. He had miscounted stuff. The boss then calls us into his office and he's yelling at us on a conference call with about a dozen lawyers. And he's saying, these idiots are going to stay here all night if it takes them to get it fixed, which we did stay a lot of the night. We did get it fixed. We got it pushed out. And there was a court hearing the next day about this information. And I had drawn the short straw to pick up my boss on the way to court. And I had to drive. And it was a pretty awkward silence. And he apologized because he said, I shouldn't have yelled at you in front of other people. But the
Mm.
reason I was so upset with you is I see so much great leadership in you, ability to you have a really successful career. And that was the first time I really remember someone speaking kind of leadership into me, and I didn't think of myself as a leader. And so that literally led me on now a 30-year plus journey of if I'm a leader, I got to get better at this. And how can I get better at it? It really took a lot of these ideas of reading books, applying them, and now having increased leadership opportunities with bigger groups and bigger organizations, and just trying to put together a book of really practical ideas that no matter where you are in your job, like I said, you could be a receptionist, you can be the top equity partner. I think we can each get better at how much influence and impact we're having on those around us every day. And so really try to break that down into how do we better lead ourselves, how can we better lead others, and then really spend a lot of time thinking about resilience because I think that's such an important part of leadership. So it's really a book that hopefully everyone can find value in, to find that they are a leader, to have that confidence, but then what do I do with that? How do I get better with that? And that's really what the purpose of the book was.
And what's the sort of favorite tip that you share in it? If they and I know that's really unfair question. It's boiling
Yeah.
300 pages down to, and I won't ask you to do the top three because that would be really terrible. But what's your favorite bit of advice to leaders? Because it's a thing that we heard in our own past, isn't it, that we tend to repeat on. So I'm just wondering, I'm intrigued.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe because we've been talking a little bit about UK, there was a great, and I can't remember his full name, but it was a London School of Business professor who talked about, who's from Calcutta, India originally, and he talked about this idea that we all have a leadership aroma, which I'd never
Okay.
really thought about that. Aroma was kind of like I went and worked out this morning. I may not smell that great, but he talked about when he had to teach during the school year, so he would only get to go home to see his family during the summer, and he said Calcutta in the summer is 105 degrees and 100% humidity, and you just feel lethargic. You're moping around. You don't want to do anything. And then he compared that to a time he got to teach a semester in South France, I think, in around Fontainebleau Forest. And he said, in the spring in Fontainebleau Forest, you can walk, you feel a vibe in your step, and you're ready to go just run and dance because it's so beautiful, the surrounding and the wind. And he says, leaders, are you showing up with like the summer in Calcutta or the spring in Fontainebleau? And it really resonated with me that I do show up, and do I just show up to my office and come into my office with my head down and close the door and shut everyone out, or do I try to engage with those around me? And it just spoke to me that as leaders, we do have an obligation to show up and really have that aroma that's helping encourage others along their journey. So that's something I really try to unpack with some practical tips in there. But that was something that really spoke to me in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, that's great. I can't find who said that. So it's
It was Professor Goshal, I think, Goshal, I
oh
think was his name.
yes. Okay, yes. Let me just yeah, yeah, I know who it is. Yeah.
It's a
Thank you
great.
for that. I'm
He's
terrible.
passed. No, he's passed away, but it's a really great clip of him talking about that concept. And again, I think one of the things of the book or any book that you read on leadership or resiliency is there an idea that maybe makes sense, and then how can I apply that concept in my organization or my team? It's going to look a little different for all of us, but that concept of leadership aroma really resonated with me.
Samantha Ghoshal.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No, good. Yeah, I'm as foxed as you. So that's really interesting, isn't it? And I mean, it's a classic, isn't it? It's that beautiful thing about the use of metaphor. And I don't think we use
Right.
metaphor and simile enough in business, isn't it? The
Right.
linguistics of leadership, I think, is something that's
Yeah.
misapplied often because you've used quite a lot of what fascinating sort of analogies and metaphors today. So it's obviously part of the way you communicate. And I guess it's part of the illustrative nature of language that's in the law, isn't it? Because it's that thing
Right.
about how do you bring a message to life? You talked about the why, but actually it's more than that, isn't it? It is that thing about how do you get people to see what you mean?
Oh yeah, and it's through storytelling.
Mm.
There's a part of the book that really talks about the power of a story, and we talk about, as I said, our vision is Baker Vision, but we're constantly talking about the stories of Baker Vision. Individuals
Mm.
who have taken some of these concepts, applied them, and then have had really outsized results. That this stuff works. Don't just
Yeah.
take Tim's word for it. So I think it is that power of storytelling is so important. And you're right, the law is built on stories and analogies in how you execute your practice.
Yes, because actually the laws are laid down, but it's the stories that are around it, they illustrate it, the case law
Yes.
that appears. Tim, I
Yeah.
could chat to you all day and I need to be respectful of your time, so I'm not going to. How can people get hold of you?
Yeah, so I'm at bakerdonaldson.com. It's the law firm, and I'm glad to always talk to people. I'm on LinkedIn and other social media channels, and then I do have a nonprofit tied into the Everybody Leads. It's called everybodyleads.org is the website. So any of those places, I'm always glad to interact and talk about leadership and resilience anytime.
Everybodyleads.org, did you say?
Org, yes, ORG.
I see. Interesting, fascinating. All right, brilliant. Look, it's been an absolute joy. We've talked about Churchill, so you've kept the British contingent happy. We talked about you've said Birmingham in an American accent, which keeps the people from Alabama happy. So I think we've all come to this, and we're very happy. I like that. Thank you so much, Tim. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you today, and I wish you continued success with the book. I'm guessing we'll be able to find it at all sorts of different retailers, all your Amazons and Barnes and Nobles, and such like.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes, it's on
great.
Amazon. I've really enjoyed this time, Russell.
Yeah, me too. Look, thanks so much time for it. I really appreciate it. So thank you, Tim. You take care.